Morning everyone and welcome to the latest edition of On the Whistle. Thanks for joining me to talk through Sunderland's 1-1 draw with Millwall. A little bit bleary-eyed after a long day yesterday, but always a pleasure to be here chatting Sunderland AFC with you. A really difficult game to assess, I think, because in the context of where Sunderland were heading into this game, I think beforehand, if you'd offered any of us really a point in one of what is the most notoriously difficult places to go in the Championship, I think we would have all taken it. You know, we already knew that Leeds would be missing 5 core first team players. That's even before you get into all the long-term absentees. And then when we got to the ground, we discovered it was even worse because Dennis Serkin couldn't play due to a broken wrist. And I think at that point, you know, if you'd said that the team would perform well for the most part and get a point, I think we've all seen it as a step in the right direction. And I still think it was. Although, of course, it was, the worst possible way for that outcome to come around, with Sunderland conceding in the 93rd minute thanks to Femi Aziz's goal on the break, which was a really tough one to take, especially because just seconds before, Sunderland has gone so close to scoring a second goal through Aleksić. I just want to start off by saying that, of course, sending our very best to the 2 Millwall fans who were affected by the medical emergencies in the first half, which forced the game to be paused for 30 minutes. Obviously, all the stuff we talk about in terms of the football is irrelevant, really, when you consider that. So, yeah, just wanted to send the best to the Millwall fans and also everyone who was involved in dealing with that situation. And hopefully both fans can make a speedy and a full recovery. In terms of the game, from a Sunderland perspective, I think in the context of the team, the fact that there was a lot of new partnerships, players in new roles in different positions that we haven't seen from them, I thought the first half was up there, or maybe I should say the first sort of part of the game up until that delay was as good as we've seen them play in the context of what was happening. I thought they played Millwall off the park. It wasn't always like free-flowing football. A lot of the time they were really happy when Millwall pressed aggressively just to turn it into the channel and ask Isidore to chase it and hold it up and relieve a bit of pressure that way. They had a nice blend between picking their moments to get their foot on the ball and pick some passes and understanding when they were under pressure, when there was a danger from the Millwall press, and just getting it out of there, basically. I thought that, as I hoped was happening, because I think it's a really attractive option while Jan Paveda's injured, I thought that Meander was a real threat off the right. We know that he works hard, we know that he tracks back, we know that he's got good positioning, but he looked such a threat cutting in off the right, and I think it was really good for Leeds to get that option. Tommy Watson, as we expected would happen, back on his favoured left side, looked a different player. A real handful for Millwall in the first half, gave Ryan Leonard all kinds of problems. And of course, Aaron Connolly getting his first goal, and I thought he did nicely linking up as well. So there were so many positives. The second half, really disappointing in terms of Millwall really being... I think you always expected, because Millwall had been so poor, there was going to be a big reaction once they'd had their sort of talk with the manager at the break and made some tweaks. So it was no surprise really that they had the better of the second half. But obviously you felt going into stoppage time that Millwall had spurned some huge chances, especially right at the start of the second half, 2 big set-piece opportunities that they wasted. But you obviously felt that once Sunderland got into 5 minutes of stoppage time that they'd kind of got through the worst of the storm. And that was what made the goal so difficult to take, especially because it came straight after a Sunderland attack of their own. So I think that's really... I think Millwall are entitled to say for sure that they deserved a point on the basis of the second half that created the better chances, albeit Sunderland could definitely have picked up a second on the break. I do think Millwall deserved a point, and from a Sunderland perspective, it's really disappointing that they've let the game get away from them. And there's obviously, as we'll go into talking on this video, there's a lot that can improve. I think it's a strange one because the frustration of the late equaliser is added to by the fact that they've drawn their previous 3 games, and that obviously means it's now a 4-game sort of drawing streak, which is not really where you want to be when you're pushing for automatic promotion, even if there's some positives within those games. I think the strange thing is that I actually think yesterday was the best result of those 4. I think obviously Coventry is the worst result because you're 2-0 up at half-time and seemingly in complete control. QPR, although Sunderland did really well with 10 men, in the last half hour of the game, you can see from QPR's form, I think that was an opportunity missed, although I thought they were okay on the day. And again, Preston played really well that night. Sunderland went to Deepdale, but the Leeds side just weren't able to produce their best. So I think it's important in a way to take this game away from the other 3, because I think that in the context of everything that was going on, the strength of the opponent, the injuries and the suspensions, I think that this was the best result of the 4. And I think it was really important that the players who stepped in get the praise that they're due. I mentioned people like Meander. I thought Adji Elise was excellent. given that he barely kicked a ball since August. I thought he deserved to be on the winning side. So I think that there are loads of positives to take away. I genuinely believe that, and in a lot of ways I'm much more positive about the performance and the result yesterday than I am about any of the previous three. But I totally accept there'll be a lot of frustration out there about the way it came about. So I'm going to get into your questions now. Thanks to everyone who sent these over on Blue Sky. Just a reminder, I'm posting on Blue Sky now as Phil Smith Reporter. That's where I'll be putting out my call for the questions and putting all my updates. So firstly, David says, was there any reason given for Hjelde and Rusin not being on the bench? Yeah, I asked Lebreeze about this after the game. Just have a sip of coffee. Both of them are injured, but Lebreeze didn't give any nature on the details of the injury, but he did just say that he didn't think they were major injuries. So at this stage, I don't think they've necessarily been ruled out of the next couple of games, although obviously there's a chance that we won't see them for a little while. We'll just have to wait and see. I should be able to get an update for you on Monday afternoon on those two. One thing I will say is that Hjelde did travel with the squad, so it's either an injury he's picked up very, very late, just before the game, or it's one that they thought potentially would recover in time for him to take his place in the squad, and that just didn't quite happen. So I think especially in Hjelde's case, the early indications are that it's not a particularly serious injury. And just following on from that, Zeus Steelix says, is there a Serkin return date? Not really. So Serkin actually broke his wrist in the 0-0 draw with QPR, played through the pain barrier for the next 2 games, but then it was decided that he needed surgery on it and the international break was the best time to do that. Unfortunately, it just hasn't recovered from the surgery as well as someone would have hoped in time. But the very clear message yesterday was that it would not be a long absence. There was some talk that he might be able to play on Tuesday against West Brom. There is a level of confidence that even if that doesn't happen, he should definitely be able to play with Sheffield United next Friday. So I don't think any of those 3 players will be out for a while, but clearly not ideal given all the other absentees as well. So let's get into some of your other questions. Thanks Liam Davis for sending this in. How worried should we be about the second half drop-off in performance? Could we have made better use of subs, even if only just to waste a bit of time to see the game out? Yeah, thanks Liam for your question. I think that I have some sympathy with Lebreeze on this because I don't think that's the situation to be introducing a lot of these younger players who don't have a lot of championship football. You're probably right in terms of the very end of the game, just to eat up some time, that maybe some subs could have helped break up the rhythm of the game, which was a bit more open than probably someone would have liked defending a lead. So I'm sympathetic to that point. But I think it wasn't the right situation for some of those young players to make what would have pretty much been their championship debut, or their second or third appearance or something of that like. I think it's one of those things that we've talked a lot about on these videos so far this season. Again, Millwall had a huge advantage by having players that could bring off the bench. Harris was just bringing on fresh legs, another forward all the way through the second half. And although Lebreeze is cautious with subs, and it's not really his manner, I think, to make loads of changes early, this was yet another game where the opposition had a huge advantage by being able to make aggressive early changes in the game because of the depth of their bench. And I think that obviously there are reasons why Sunland aren't able to do that at the moment. Injury, suspensions, there's a fair bit of bad luck in there. But if the situation hasn't improved in January, then the clear need there is to recruit, because this is something that's happening time and time again. And for me, we can talk about the tactics, and I understand that totally. But I think that there is a big fatigue factor in why Sunland maybe are seeming to drop off, why they can't produce 90-minute performances. And, they either need their luck to change or they need to recruit when the opportunity presents itself, because I do think that's the reason why they've been, why it's costing them. The other thing I would say, Liam, is Millwall are so difficult to beat at home. They are right up there in the table in brilliant form for a reason. They make it difficult for you. The first half, they were dreadful. The second half, fair play to them. They were a completely different team. And I think that while we can definitely look at Sunland, I think that we also have to credit Millwall for turning it around, for doing what they do. It's not easy to play against. Sunland are far from the only team to struggle against it. So I think we do have to give them some credit for that as well. They have a unique style and they do very, very well, and fair play to them. It's obviously a factor in the final result. I'm going to put this question in there as well from Joe, because it's a similar theme. Joe Hughes. Joe, thanks so much for your question. Great to hear from you. Why do we set off so much away from home? Is it a hangover from dropping points at Plymouth and Watford? Yeah, I think this dropping off thing is, I've seen a lot of fans talking about, which is I completely respect, because we have seen someone play with a pretty low block for much of this season. The only thing I would say is, and maybe I would have to watch the game back, in the ground at the time, it felt like more of what Millwall were doing than a conscious effort from Sunderland to drop off. It felt like Sunderland couldn't get out. But I might be wrong on that, and that's maybe something I can ask Lebrice about when I next get the opportunity, Joe, and hopefully get a bit more insight for you. The one thing I will say is that Lebrice, speaking after the game, didn't seem too concerned about where Sunderland were defended, and actually felt that their defending of the box and what they were doing in the defensive phase was really good. What he was critical of, and where he said his team have to improve, is he said they just didn't use the ball well enough once they'd won that first contact. So the Meander chances, and obviously the big Aleksić chance, was a great example of Sunderland actually having huge opportunities to kill the game off, but just not getting the pass right, not doing the right things under pressure on possession. We know they like to play on the break, but if you're going to do that, you've got to get your first or second pass right to set up that counter-attack. And there were too many times yesterday where they were just inviting pressure back onto them. So I agree with you, it would be nice at times to see Sunderland be a bit more proactive, but Lebrice was very much felt that, you know, the game was there and the opportunities were there and Sunderland just didn't take them. Again, personally, you know, happy for, I know people will disagree. I think fatigue was a factor. I think players like Rick, who were brilliant in the first half, weren't quite able to find that speed of thought and that precision in their passing in the second half. And a good few counter-attacking opportunities sort of went by the wayside. I think that's inevitable with the minutes that some of these young players are playing. And as I say, I think getting some more depth in the coming weeks is going to be absolutely vital. Although I feel I've been saying that all season and not too much has changed. So yeah, thanks again for sending that in. A couple of other comments here. Neil says, as disappointing as the late equaliser was, it's really important we take the positives. Good performance despite half a team missing, and look ahead to a really important week. Yep, I think that's always true in the Championship. You know, a disappointing result can quickly be flipped if you back it up. If you get a good win at home, then this becomes a very good away point. So I agree with that, Neil. Chris says, disappointing result, what feels different to Coventry. That was 2 points thrown away. This was 2 points dropped at the death with half a team out. We do need a win though, and we do need to sort our game management out. Yeah, Chris, I think everyone would agree with that. Good question here from Chris. Chris says, do we need to strengthen in Jan? We always have loads of injuries and the bench looked very light today for Millwall away. Chris, hopefully I've kind of addressed that already in the video. I totally agree with you. Obviously there's a lot of bad luck in there, but I do think the bench is a persistent issue for Sunland this season. Even if Lebrice doesn't seem to want to make loads of subs at the moment, he doesn't really have the option to make that many, and I think that's really important moving forward. And if the injuries don't clear in time, then recruitment's going to be really important. Davey along that line, thanks Davey for your comments, says hopefully we can add a bit more strength and depth in January. He also says, interested to know what you thought about Connolly and Aleksić. So definitely Connolly's brightest performance. Not just the goal, I know it's easy when a player is striker scores to say he did well, but actually I thought through the first half his link-up play was really nice, obviously playing in a much deeper role than he would be used to, almost playing as a third midfielder really. Showed some really nice touches, got involved with some nice bits of link-up play over on the left-hand side. I think it was nice for him actually to play from the start. I know Preston didn't really work out because he was really isolated, but a lot of the times he's come off the bench, it's been when someone has been defending the lead, and it's just been about seeing the game out, winning free kicks, you know, taking a bit of time out of the game. He hasn't really had much of a chance to show us what he can do as a sort of dynamic forward. And yesterday was a big step in the right direction, and nice to see him and he still play well together. It's another option for Lebrice. So I'd be positive about Connolly, Davey. And I have to say I'd be positive about Aleksić as well. I totally get it that obviously he's missed a big chance for Reading, and Millwall have gone straight up the other end and scored, which is incredibly frustrating. But that was about the most difficult situation he could have come onto in his debut. So I'm not really seeing any of the ball. Millwall away, they're just putting an absolute barrage of balls into the box. I thought he did okay. I thought he played one beautiful switch of play that set up a big counter-attack. His first touch broadly was very good, although there were 1 or 2 moments where it got away from him. What was nice to see actually is he showed a bit of strength at times. He was happy to put his body in and use a bit of strength as well. So for a 19-year-old playing his first Championship game, I thought there was some encouraging signs there, Davey. You know, obviously not getting carried away. I think it's going to be a long process with him. He's a player who's clearly been signed for the long run. I think Sunderland have signed him knowing that like Mundell, like Trey Hume, there'd be a big period of adaptation. So I don't think we were suddenly going to start seeing him play loads and loads of minutes just yet. But I actually was quite encouraged. You know, the way Lebrice has talked about him, about being a really attacking midfielder and being really careful with him, I almost expected him to maybe be a little bit lightweight from the way he was talking about him, but that absolutely wasn't the case at all. So to be honest, I know the headline will be about his sort of missing him one-on-one, which to be fair, he very, very nearly scored. The goalkeeper was quite lucky. I think that, well, it was a good save, but it could have gone anywhere once it had sort of hit him. You know, I think there were some positives to take. So yeah, hopefully I've answered all your questions there. Thanks so much for sending them in. Just a reminder, if you're not on Blue Sky and you're thinking about it, I am on there posting my Sunland updates, and you can send in your questions for the next couple of games. So I'll be back after the next couple of games with some more additions on the whistle. There may well be a feature-length Raw podcast tomorrow as well to go through the game and preview the next week. But yeah, really frustrating circumstances, a decent point, but obviously loads for Sunderland to improve on, and really important that they sort of get that win in the next couple of games. Thanks so much for spending some time with me on your Sunday. I hope you have a lovely rest of your weekend, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.